In this video, we talk about what the fluff is Docker. According to Wikipedia, Docker is a set of platform-as-a-service products that use OS-level virtualization to deliver software in packages called containers. Containers are isolated from one another and bundle their own software, libraries, and configuration files. They can communicate with each other through well-defined channels. All containers are run by a single operating system kernel and therefore use fewer resources than virtual machines. The software that hosts the containers is called Docker. Great, but what does that mean? The simple answer is a container talks to Docker, a service that manages its files, networking, and creation. Normally, applications affect other applications on your system. You can't have two versions of many programs running at the same time. They usually fight for different file versions or program versions on your machine. With Docker, the software gets its own container and can happily run side by side because it doesn't know about the other programs or other file versions. It has everything it needs right in its own container, which is great for operations. But what does that do for developers? First, we have to step back through the history of deployment. When applications first were installed, the only option was physical hardware. A box operation calls a server. When we need more power, we would have to get more servers. It's expensive and time-consuming to set up. Not only do you have the physical hardware cost, you have to load all the software and configure each program separately. One day, someone figured out that if you just bought a much bigger system, then use software to split the system into multiple systems, this would allow you to make a virtual machine or a VM. This is a much better way for operations to run, but for developers, this really doesn't change anything. They still have to ask for servers, and then it could possibly take a long period of time for a ticket to get filled out for that server to be set up. Once the server's ready, they have to go out and configure the software on that server. VMs were never created with the developer workflow in mind. Docker and containers were created with both the developer and operations in mind. With Docker installed, to run a service or an application is a couple commands at the command line. They can be run side by side, killed, and restarted without affecting anything else on the system. We no longer need the overhead of an operating system duplicated across every machine, whether they're physical or virtual, saving us 10 to 20 gigs of space just on the operating system, not to mention all the power being used for memory, CPU, and everything else that goes into that. This lets us use less overall hardware and scales out our software. Specifically for developers, using containers means that if you develop your application and deploy it in containers, you have identical environments configured. No more works on my machine, far fewer missing configurations or software missing issues. If it runs for you, it will run for them. If this all sounds great and you currently build .NET applications for Windows, you should check out Docker on Windows. He does an amazing job detailing the steps required to go from a monolithic app to a well-functioning set of apps running in containers. Check the link in the description below. One last thing. Containers bring a lot of other interesting uses that are too big for this video. Orchestration, or managing containers, allows us to do things like zero downtime, A/B testing, or automatic load balancing. Possibly in another video, we'll talk about Kubernetes and orchestration. Do you want more information to make your development life easier? Subscribe by clicking the button below. Then watch other topics on .NET development and CI/CD.